Bang! The door to my lake cabin didn't just open. It practically exploded inward, slamming against the wall with a crack that echoed through the quiet room. My heart jumped into my throat and I almost spilled hot coffee all over myself. I turned sharply and there she was, Karen. Not just any Karen, but the Karen of our neighborhood HOA. If you've ever had one of those neighbors who think they run the world, you know exactly what I mean. Her sharp heels clacked against the wooden floor as she stepped inside without a word of invitation. Her eyes scanned the cabin like a detective searching for hidden evidence. She had that expression, eyebrows raised, lips pressed so tight they could cut glass, the same one she used when she told me once that my mailbox was one shade darker than approved. "What do you think you're doing in here?" she demanded, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. I blinked at her, still processing the fact that she had barged in like she owned the place. "Excuse me?" I asked, setting down my mug. "This is my cabin." Karen didn't even flinch. She marched a few steps further inside, her perfume filling the room. Her chin held high like she was inspecting her kingdom. "Cabins by the lake must be approved by the HOA," she declared, her tone dripping with authority she didn't actually have. "And this one," she said, waving her hand dramatically, "isn't." I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so ridiculous. Here I was, in my own cabin, a place I bought, paid for, and maintained with my own money. And this woman just stormed in, ready to hand out punishments like a medieval queen. Now you have to understand something. My history with Karen goes way back. She's the type who shows up to HOA meetings 15 minutes early, just so she can sit in the power seat, at the center of the table. The type who hands out violation notices for things like grass too green or garden hose left visible. I once got a warning letter from her because I left my recycling bin at the curb for 2 hours, longer than allowed. So believe me, I knew how far she was willing to go, but this was new territory. As she circled the living room, her heels clacking with each step, she started listing imaginary violations like she was reading off a grocery list. "This furniture looks unapproved. That rug doesn't match community standards. And that lamp? Fire hazard waiting to happen." She wasn't even looking at me anymore, just pacing around, hands on her hips, completely convinced of her own authority. "Karen," I said finally, trying to stay calm, "this is private property. You can't just—" She cut me off, wagging her finger in my face. "Don't you dare tell me what I can or can't do. I am the head of this HOA, and I know the rules better than anyone. If this cabin isn't up to standards, I'll have you out of here so fast your head will spin." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, almost amused now. She had no idea, not about the law, not about property rights, and especially not about the very important guest sitting quietly in the corner of the room. I caught his eye and he gave me the faintest smile, like he was enjoying the show. But Karen kept going, her voice rising with each word. "Do you realize how disruptive this cabin is to the community? An eyesore, a violation, a complete disregard for everything we've built here. You can't just do whatever you want by the lake. There are rules, and those rules exist for a reason. And if you think you're going to get away with this, you're sadly mistaken." Her words tumbled out so fast, so harsh, that she was practically out of breath. I sat there, sipping the last of my coffee slowly, giving her all the rope she needed to hang herself with. Every second she spoke, she dug the hole deeper. Then she pointed dramatically toward the fireplace, like she was unveiling a crime scene. "This is not up to code. Not at all. This whole place is dangerous, unsafe, and unapproved. I should have the sheriff here right now." I raised an eyebrow, biting back a grin. If only she knew who she was threatening in that very moment. She thought she was just bullying me, her favorite pastime. But she was seconds away from realizing this little power trip was about to cost her far more than she ever imagined. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. Across the cabin, seated comfortably in the worn leather chair by the window, was my guest for the afternoon. The only person I trusted enough to bring here today. He wasn't just anybody either. He was the state attorney general, the top legal officer of the entire state, the man who could shut down corrupt organizations with a single order. And here he was, sipping his tea quietly, watching the chaos unfold like he was in the audience of a comedy show. Karen, in her typical fashion, didn't even notice him at first. Too busy stomping around, pointing at imaginary violations and rattling off HOA laws that she basically made up herself. Her voice echoed through the room as she jabbed her finger toward the fireplace. This isn't regulation. You can't just build whatever you want wherever you want. The HOA has standards, and this cabin clearly doesn't meet them. I could feel the Attorney General's eyes lock on mine, and I nearly laughed. He wasn't angry, not even annoyed. If anything, there was this amused curiosity in his expression, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was witnessing. He leaned back in the chair, crossed one leg over the other, and just let Karen dig herself deeper into the hole she was so confidently creating. "Karen," I said slowly, trying to give her an out, "do you even realize who you're talking to right now?" She spun on me with that familiar glare that could sour milk. "I don't care who you're entertaining in this illegal cabin of yours. Guests or no guests, the rules apply to everyone. And since you clearly don't understand that, we might have to issue fines. Maybe even—" She paused dramatically. "Eviction." At that point, the Attorney General set down his teacup with a soft clink on the saucer. The sound was small, but it carried so much weight in the quiet room that Karen finally turned and noticed him. He leaned forward slightly, his calm voice cutting through her storm. "Eviction, you say?" For a split second, I thought she might finally realize the magnitude of the situation. But Karen was Karen. Her pride wouldn't let her back down. She narrowed her eyes at him, clearly unimpressed. "And who exactly are you?" she demanded, folding her arms across her chest as if she had caught him trespassing too. The silence that followed was heavy. My guest didn't answer right away. He just studied her calmly, letting her arrogance fill the space, letting her show everyone in the room exactly who she was without needing to be prompted. Karen, never comfortable with silence, doubled down. "This cabin is a clear violation of HOA standards. And as the head of the association, it's my responsibility to make sure we maintain order. I don't care who you are, rules are rules. If you can't respect them, you'll have to face the consequences." She said it with such authority, such conviction, that if you didn't know the law, you might almost believe her. Almost. The Attorney General tilted his head slightly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He hadn't revealed his identity yet, and I could tell he was curious just how far Karen would take this little performance. He laced his fingers together and rested them on his knee, sitting there like a professor waiting for a student to realize their mistake. I decided to test her one more time. "Karen," I said carefully, "don't you think you might be overstepping just a little?" Her laugh was sharp, almost mocking. "Overstepping? Please, this is my job. Without people like me, this neighborhood would fall into chaos. People would paint their houses neon colors, leave trash on the lawn, and build unsafe cabins like this one. If anything, I'm the only one holding this community together. You should be thanking me." I almost choked on my own breath. Thanking her? For breaking into my private property and threatening me in front of the Attorney General of all people? She was unbelievable, and yet that was the beauty of it. She still had no idea, no clue that the man she was treating like some random stranger held more power in his signature than she could ever hope to achieve in a lifetime of HOA meetings. The Attorney General finally leaned back, his voice smooth but firm. "You seem very passionate about these rules." Karen lifted her chin proudly. "Of course I am. Rules are what keep communities strong. Without them, we'd be nothing. And if people think they can just walk all over the HOA, they'll learn quickly that I don't tolerate disrespect. I'll evict, I'll take whatever measures are necessary. That's how I've always run things, and that's how I'll continue to run things." Her words echoed in the cabin, sharp and unyielding. She truly believed she was untouchable, the final authority in our little lakeside community. She didn't realize she had just said all that in front of the one man who could dismantle her entire operation if he wanted to. I exchanged another glance with him, and this time his smirk widened just a little. He was enjoying this, watching her dig herself deeper, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the rug out from under her feet. And I had to admit, I was enjoying it too. Before I could even get another word in, Karen marched over to the window like she was on a battlefield inspection. Her heels struck the wooden floor with sharp cracks, each step echoing her determination to find something, anything to prove her point. She jabbed her finger toward the lake outside. "Do you see that dock?" She snapped, glaring at me as though I had committed a crime. "It's at least 2 feet longer than regulations allow. Completely unacceptable." I followed her finger, glancing out the window. My dock, the same dock that had been there since before I even bought the cabin, sat peacefully in the sun. Birds perched along the railing, the water shimmered, and nothing about it looked threatening. But to Karen it might as well have been a ticking time bomb. "And that swing on the porch," she added, her voice rising with theatrical flair. "Absolutely against HOA policy. Unsafe, unsightly, and I don't like it one bit. The rules clearly state." She pulled out a folded, wrinkled copy of the HOA handbook from her oversized purse and waved it in the air like a badge. "Section 9, paragraph 3, no unsanctioned exterior fixtures." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. A swing, a simple wooden swing where I like to sit with my coffee in the morning. That was her grand crime scene evidence. She wasn't finished. Her eyes narrowed as they locked onto the roofline. "And don't even get me started on that satellite dish. Absolutely hideous. I warned your neighbor 3 streets over about theirs, and if I had to, I'll call the board again. This is a disgrace to the community." I glanced toward the Attorney General. He was sitting calmly, fingers steepled, his expression somewhere between fascination and disbelief. He looked like a man watching a play that was half comedy, half tragedy. The corner of his lips twitched, but he stayed silent, letting Karen run wild. Karen turned back to me, her hands now firmly planted on her hips, her glare sharper than ever. "This entire cabin is unauthorized. Do you hear me? Unauthorized. I've been watching this place for weeks and I knew something was off. I won't allow it, not here. Not under my watch." Her voice cracked like a whip, filling every inch of the small cabin. I stayed seated, arms folded, my calmness only fueling her outrage. She stepped closer, her fingers stabbing the air in front of my face. "You think you're special? You think the rules don't apply to you? Well, let me tell you something. This HOA is mine. I run it and no one, not even you, will get away with this nonsense." For a moment, I almost pitied her. She was so wrapped up in her own sense of power that she couldn't see the trap she'd walked into. She didn't see the Attorney General leaning back in his chair, his sharp eyes following her every word, storing them away like evidence in a courtroom. She didn't realize that every threat she threw at me was landing squarely in front of the most powerful legal voice in the state. Karen wasn't satisfied with just scolding me. She needed to make it dramatic. "I'll have the HOA board here within the hour," she declared proudly, puffing out her chest. "We'll issue the largest fine this neighborhood has ever seen. And if you don't comply, I'll make sure you're evicted. You'll be packing your bags before the week is over." Her voice had grown so loud that it bounced off the walls. She wasn't just talking to me anymore. She was performing like she had an audience. And in a way, she did, but not the one she thought. I could feel the tension rise, the kind of tension that comes right before a storm breaks. The Attorney General adjusted his tie, his calm movements a sharp contrast to Karen's frantic energy. He looked like a man preparing to finally step in, ready to put an end to the circus. But Karen, blind in her fury, kept pressing forward. She leaned so close I could see the lines around her mouth tighten. "Mark my words," she hissed, her voice low and venomous now. "You're finished here. You will regret ever thinking you could outsmart me or ignore my rules. This cabin will be gone and you'll be nothing more than a memory." For a moment, silence filled the room. Even the birds outside seemed to pause, as if the world was waiting for the next move. Then the Attorney General rose slowly to his feet. The sound of his chair pushing back on the wooden floor was soft, but it was enough to freeze Karen mid-sentence. She turned her head, startled, as if she'd forgotten he was even in the room. Her mouth opened to speak, but nothing came out. She stared up at him, blinking rapidly, the shift in energy finally sinking in. He wasn't just a guest. He wasn't just some friend of mine sipping tea in the corner. He was about to flip the entire situation upside down. And for the first time since she stormed through that door, Karen looked uncertain. The air in the cabin seemed to shift the moment he stood. The Attorney General didn't raise his voice, didn't slam his fist, didn't even scowl. He simply straightened his jacket and looked down at Karen with a calm authority that silenced everything around him. Even the creak of the wooden floor under his shoes seemed deliberate, steady, powerful. "Ma'am," he began, his voice firm but even. "I think it's time you introduce yourself properly, because I don't believe you quite understand the situation you've just walked into." Karen blinked at him, caught off guard by the measured tone. She wasn't used to people speaking to her like that. Most neighbors either cowered or avoided her altogether. But instead of backing down, her pride flared. Her lips curled into a smirk, and she gave a dismissive half-snort. "And who exactly are you to tell me what's what?" she said, her arms folding tightly across her chest like armor. The Attorney General reached into his jacket slowly, pulling out a slim black leather wallet. He flipped it open with practiced ease, revealing a badge and an official ID that gleamed in the soft light of the cabin. He held it just long enough for Karen to register what she was looking at. "I'm the State Attorney General," he said plainly. The words hit the room like thunder. For the first time since she barged in, Karen's face lost all its color. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She stared at the badge, blinked rapidly, and then looked back up at him as if hoping she had misheard. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice cracking. The Attorney General closed the wallet and slipped it back into his jacket, his movements unhurried, deliberate. He raised a hand, silencing her before she could try to excuse herself. "So let me get this straight," he said, his tone calm but edged with steel. "You entered a private residence without permission. You issued threats of eviction, fines, and legal action, all without any authority. And you've done this in front of the chief law enforcement officer of the state." Karen swallowed hard, her posture shrinking. The fire in her eyes had flickered into something else. Panic. For a woman so used to controlling others, the sudden loss of power was almost painful to watch. Her hands fidgeted at her sides, and she shifted from one foot to the other, searching desperately for a way to backpedal. "Well, I was just trying to," she began weakly. But the Attorney General cut her off again. "Harass a homeowner?" His voice sharpened, though he didn't raise it. "Intimidate them? Threaten them with baseless consequences? Tell me, what exactly were you trying to do?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For once, Karen had no snappy retort, no prepared line about rules or regulations. She stood frozen, caught in a trap of her own making. The Attorney General took a step closer, his presence towering over her. He didn't need to shout. His authority filled the room so completely that her earlier bluster seemed laughable now. "You seem to believe the HOA gives you powers that extend beyond your role," he continued. "But let me make this perfectly clear. You do not have the right to enter homes uninvited. You do not have the right to threaten eviction. And you certainly do not have the right to abuse your neighbors in the name of so-called rules." Karen's face flushed red, then pale again. Her breathing quickened, shallow and uneven. She glanced at the door as if calculating how fast she could escape. "You may think you're above the law," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But you're standing in front of the law right now. And I assure you, I take matters like this very seriously." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy and final. Karen clutched her purse tighter, her earlier confidence shattered like glass on the floor. She mumbled something about misunderstanding and community spirit, but the Attorney General didn't budge. "This isn't about community spirit," he said, his tone cutting clean through her excuses. "This is about respect. Respect for property, respect for privacy, and respect for the law. You've shown none of that today." Karen's eyes darted toward me, almost pleading, as though I might step in and rescue her. But I stayed exactly where I was, arms folded, watching justice unfold right in front of me. She had pushed too far for too long, and now she was finally being held accountable. Not by me, but by someone she could never bully or intimidate. The Attorney General let the silence stretch, his gaze fixed firmly on her, until she finally lowered her head. It was the first time I had ever seen Karen look defeated, and it was glorious. The Attorney General didn't raise his voice as he stepped closer to Karen, but his words carried more weight than a shout ever could. "Harassment of homeowners, abuse of power, and illegal entry, these are not minor issues. They are serious matters, and frankly," he paused, his eyes never leaving hers, "I'm very concerned about the way this HOA is being managed." Karen's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. Her bravado had completely evaporated, replaced with a nervous, shaky demeanor. She clutched her purse strap so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I was just trying to enforce the rules," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The Attorney General tilted his head slightly, unimpressed. "Rules," he said sharply, "do not give you the right to trespass into someone's home. They do not give you the authority to issue false threats of eviction. And they certainly do not give you license to intimidate your neighbors. What you've done today is unacceptable. In fact, it borders on criminal." Karen's eyes widened in horror at the word criminal. She looked around the cabin as though hoping the walls themselves might offer her an escape. Her usual smug expression was nowhere to be found. Instead, she looked cornered, like a child caught red-handed in the middle of mischief. I didn't mean," she began, but the Attorney General cut her off again with a firm raise of his hand. "No, intent doesn't erase impact," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "This isn't just about today. Something tells me this behavior isn't new. I've heard enough from residents about how HOAs misuse their power, but seeing it firsthand," he shook his head slowly, "is alarming." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, fumbling for words. Her hands fluttered nervously at her sides before she finally blurted, "I just wanted to keep the neighborhood in order." The Attorney General's eyes narrowed. "Order is not maintained through bullying. Order is not maintained by violating people's rights. What you've demonstrated today is not leadership, it's harassment. And I intend to look deeper into it." That was the breaking point. Karen's face crumpled, her composure cracking like glass under pressure. She muttered something about needing to check on her dog, her voice weak and unconvincing. And then she spun on her heel and bolted for the door. Her heels clattered against the floor as she made her escape, and within seconds the cabin door slammed shut behind her with a hollow thud. Silence filled the room. For a moment all I could hear was the distant sound of water lapping against the dock and the faint chirping of birds outside. Then the Attorney General exhaled softly, a dry chuckle escaping his lips. "Quite the character," he murmured. I finally let out the laugh I'd been holding in, shaking my head. "You have no idea. That's been my life since moving here. Karen has made it her mission to make everyone miserable, and today you saw her at her finest." The Attorney General picked up his teacup again, as calm as ever. He sipped it like nothing extraordinary had just happened, then set it back down with a thoughtful hum. "Well," he said, "I'll be taking a much closer look at how this HOA operates. Something tells me this wasn't the first time she's pulled a stunt like that, and it likely won't be the last, unless someone intervenes." I nodded, relief washing over me. For so long, Karen had been untouchable, using her HOA position like a weapon, unchecked and unchallenged. But now, for the first time, someone with real power had witnessed her antics firsthand. And not just anyone, the Attorney General himself. I leaned back in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I think the whole neighborhood will thank you if you do," I said honestly. "She's been running around unchecked for too long." He gave a small, knowing smile. "Well, let's just say I don't take kindly to bullies, especially when they hide behind so-called rules to justify their actions." The room grew quiet again, but this time, it was a peaceful quiet. No shouting, no accusations, no unwanted intrusions. Just the sound of nature outside, and the knowledge that Karen's reign of terror had finally met a wall she couldn't scale. I poured myself another cup of coffee, the steam rising in lazy curls, and for the first time since buying the cabin, I felt like I could truly enjoy it without worrying about her sudden appearances. Across from me, the Attorney General seemed just as relaxed, as though this had been nothing more than an interesting afternoon diversion. Sometimes life has a funny way of bringing justice exactly when it's needed most. Karen thought she was untouchable, the queen of the neighborhood, the final authority on everything from porch swings to paint colors. But she picked the wrong cabin, the wrong day, and definitely the wrong person to try her intimidation tactics on. As I took my first sip of fresh coffee, a grin spread across my face, because I knew one thing for sure: Karen wouldn't be barging into anyone else's home anytime soon.